maybe we'll get some people joining us.
I really hope so. Yeah. Good morning for me, afternoon for you, Philip. I am Sydney Chris. I am the sleepiest of bears in the RPG community. I am up at 8 a.m. on a public holiday Monday to chat to Philip Wessels, the incredibly sexy designer of the incredibly sexy Pack of Strays, which is an intimate and messy werewolf drama built on the Lasers and Feelings engine. He's also a great voice for safe play tools and for playing in unsafe spaces. Philip, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon.
Yeah. Thanks for hanging out with me.
I love hanging out with you, and I'm so eager to chat about all these great things we've got. So I'm going to jump straight into it.
Yeah.
So my first question, which is perhaps the most important question that I have for you at the moment, is what is it that makes Pack of Strays more than a lasers and feelings hack?
Well, there's two ways to answer that, and the first is that it's more than lasers and feelings mechanics. I threw in some strings from Monster Hearts, and there's if you play the expanded material, there's some additional kind of Apocalypse World feeling kind of moves that happen. But aside from that, I think it's more than a lasers and feelings hack because it's I think when you think of a lot of lasers and feelings hacks, you think of a certain tone. And well, I took lasers and feelings mechanics, though the product that I ended up creating was not lasers and feelings tone. It's very much a more expanded play that you play for more than one session, and you get into your character, you get into the pack, you get into the community. So yeah, I mean, two different ways. It's kind of more than just lasers and feelings in werewolf skin.
And it really is. It really reads as something that's so much more. And a big part of that is, as you said, the tone being based on marginalized people becoming monsters. I guess for context, for myself and for the people that are watching, can we start off like with that context? What is it that that makes you one of the strays?
Yeah, it's a very intentional thing. And when you make a werewolf in Pack of Strays, you're not just anyone who became a werewolf, and your pack is not just anyone who became a werewolf. You're not a rich, straight, white, cis male guy, right? It's impossible to be that in Pack of Strays. You are very much so. There's in some way that you're marginalized. You're either differently abled or you're poor, homeless, queer. One of those reasons. I think there's some other ones too, but for some reason you're a stray in society. Maybe you have a drug abuse problem, and the idea is that your life was already hard, and you're already marginalized. You're already kind of this outcast of society. Oh, and now you're a werewolf too, and you have this pack that makes this small community that you're in that makes it easier to be a werewolf, but also easier to deal with all that stuff. So there's very much this idea that the outliers kind of hang on to each other to get through things
and band together. Yeah.
So
I mean, we're talking about like those really sharp edges, and looking at the first version that I have available to me, which is that the one from Big Bad Con 2016?
Yeah, that is it.
It is very gentle. It's a lot more gentle than the published version is.
Yeah, it's definitely changed.
Yeah, can you tell me like what was the process like of that game becoming sharper? Was that something that you like? Did you play it and you're like, oh man, this doesn't have the teeth that I want, or what was it that brought it from this this wonderful game about going on a run with cool-headed strays to like seeing red and becoming violent, and all these things that are in the current version.
Right. Yeah. I mean, from the start, the game had like I think a lot of my games have this quality of being like emotionally charged for me as a designer. I guess you could say politically charged in a way. And Pack of Stars was no different. I mean, this was in 2016, right before the election. So, yeah, I was at Big Bad Con. I was there the first time. It's just a weekend, and I didn't really know very many people there. Now I do. Like I know Yoshi and everyone, but at that time I was like, oh, I've got time to kill. So I just decided, hey, I'm just gonna like do this little like quick hack, you know, in my free time, and maybe I can get someone to play with me. And I did actually. Yeah. I got it done, that first version. It looks awful, but I got it done and I got it played and people had fun. It was very different though. It definitely played like more of a kind of, I guess you could say, gonzo experience. It was more hapless, haphazard kind of werewolves, just being crazy. And it was a lot of fun. And I could understand why people wouldn't play a game like that. And I had fun and I would play a game like that. But yeah, I mean, there's always that feeling like that I have as a creator, and it's like I need to express something, you know. And so like even if I can't quite put it into words at the time, like there's this frustration and this like voice in my head that's like screaming to get out, and it comes out in my design. So as I continue to work on things, I think it comes out more and more. And I like that. I definitely wanted to go that direction once I got the glimpse of it in Pack of Strays. You know, like from the very first start, you're a stray, so that was already there. But that was definitely something that I just wanted to push more and more and more. And so it went through like several different iterations. I mean, it was very different at the start. It was a GM-less game at the start, and I ended up going more GM'd with that later. But just very different tone at the start. I think I went more into like Apocalypse World style moves in like one of the early editions, and eventually dropped those and just went straight with the stuff on the sheet. But yeah, I was definitely looking for how to kind of strike that tone with it. And I think it just kind of came out of the characters and just kind of the situation that they're in, right? Like they're marginalized and they're in a community, and that community is an important part of the game. Like I don't think you could play Pack of Strays without playing with community, playing with the place that they're in. Like that first game was pretty much just a, you know, bloody trail through different locations, right? And they didn't connect any. But once the strings got in there, because in the first version I don't think it had those alpha strings. Like once those got in there, the pack dynamics started going. And then yeah, here we go.
That first version does not have alpha strings. It
go to the bottom there. Yeah, no alpha strings. You just get alpha status, and so that was very different. And once those got in there, and like I think the next version I put those in there, that really like amped it up as far as the dynamics go. And you know, once the pack dynamics start going, and then you kind of plant them inside of this community where you like are connecting, you know, them with NPCs and connecting them with places and connecting them with their life, right? Because these are, you know, they're not just werewolves, they're people too. So they have like jobs, or they have like somewhere they live. And, you know, after you connect all those dots, you end up with this thing that's kind of precious. And, you know, like it's not perfect. It's actually pretty bad, but it's all they have. So, and as you play, you have those softer scenes where you actually connect with like some of the non-player characters, and you connect with these things you do and like these resources you have, and then like the shit hits the fan, and all of a sudden you don't have that connection anymore, or you've lost this place. Like this place is no longer safe for you, so you can't even, you know, go there. And the game pushes you towards the territories being precious, especially if you play with like the expanded like hunters material that's in Codex Moonlight. If like all of that is designed to kind of push you towards um, like needing those safe spaces that you've carved out in this city, um, and kind of going from there. Yeah,
Which yeah, those safe spaces are by design very temporary, right? Like you work really hard to carve
yeah,
them out, and then
yeah.
they
It,
disappear.
yeah, it's like you have to like it's like where your character is situated, right? Like you can
Mm.
go other places, but and part of it's going to be like GM experience, pushing them into those important places. Like if they've got to meet someone, then oh, you've got to go here, and
Hmm.
so there is some steering involved, but it is definitely intended to where it's a game about that involves a lot of territories and kind of being on the move, and kind of exploring this community and exploring the city that they live in. I mean, the default setting is Twilight Bay, which is this huge city that's inspired by like Seattle and other places.
Yeah.
But you can also play in like Mercy Falls, which is this little tiny town that hardly has any territories in it. And then yeah, this is the I think this is version 2.
This is version 2 with
Um,
Twilight
yeah,
Bay. That's
yeah, you can
thing.
see the Apocalypse World style moves on the right there,
Hmm.
um, and then the Twilight Bay map is at the bottom
Yeah,
there.
I want to talk about these Apocalypse World style moves because this is something I actually hadn't noticed until you mentioned them. What were you trying to build by putting in really clear moves in there? What did you think that the Lasers and Feelings base was lacking?
It was just for pushing towards a certain kind of story, like pushing towards a certain kind of experience.
Yep.
Like as we like talked about earlier, like Lasers and Feelings is kind of it's kind of a ride, right? And it's really fun. Like I love running Lasers and Feelings and everything. But if you're trying to like push for a certain kind of mood, um, it requires a lot more dedication and commitment from like everyone at the table, especially the GM, to kind of steer it towards that, right? Like Lasers and Feelings is it's kind of meant to be kind of a light kind of experience. I honestly think that's kind of what John Harper was going for with it. Those moves were basically like, okay, like maybe I can add in some mood here, maybe I can push towards a more like werewolfy kind of story. But yeah, honestly, I can't remember them that well because it was so long ago.
But
but yeah,
it seems like
yeah,
they kind of got rolled into alpha strings,
yeah.
especially like a lot of these, giving them submissive looks and that sort of stuff. Like very, yeah,
That idea, yeah,
there's
definitely.
beautiful stuff in here as well about like when you enter another pack member's den and ask for hospitality. Oh, that's so good, man. These moves are. Part of what makes Pack of Strays beautiful is how well it communicates your intent through very few words. But boy, they are just these moves are just so beautifully specific.
Yeah, and everyone watching should know that pretty much everything on this page is cut from the game now.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like I'm so glad that I love you to death, Phil, but God, I'm glad that you don't have the ninjas, cowboys, and merfolk in the.
I was really into that at the time.
Oh man, you are more than welcome to be.
Yeah, that was from because like I was telling you the other day, it's like I had this part of me that like wanted to go the darker route, and then this other part of me that's like, oh, I want something lighthearted. Everything is so awful right now. I just want like a really fun experience. And so like they're like both of them are like fighting in my head, like which way this game should go. And like
Mhm.
I was watching Steven Universe at the time, and that was a really big inspiration for me because I really appreciate that show. I am wearing a Steven Universe hat right now.
Oh, that's adorable.
And I was really feeling that. I like I felt like there was a story that could be told that was like lighthearted werewolf pack kind of living in the city, and it's fun or whatever. But um that's not the game. Like that wasn't it. So like there were like if you looked at the core of the game, it wanted to be
Mhm.
something else. Once you had the character customization, the list that you choose from, the things that go into your character, and then you add on like the strings and stuff. Like maybe the strings and stuff, the pack dynamics, maybe you could use that in like something Steven University, but the characters themselves were like,
Yeah.
you need to take us seriously. You need to take our lives seriously, right? Like
Yes.
it you can't tell like a really lighthearted story about people who are really struggling, right?
Yeah.
There's more to it than the good times.
Oh
So I
man,
mean,
I
I
have
think
so many things to talk to you about that.
yeah, and I think that you still do have like really good moments when you're playing Pack of Strays, but that's not it. Like
Mhm.
that those are very special moments that are not the entirety of the gameplay. Like most of the gameplay is actually a little bit more crazy, a little bit more uh, stressful, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to point out that this is really important to me. This number 5 here, Play Run Raw, is in every instance of Pack of Strays. This goes in at the beginning and it never comes out. It
Yeah.
is you needed to have that in there, and
Yeah, yeah. I
it's
mean,
amazing because the tone of the game changes so much, but these 3 words stay the same through every instance.
well, that's the thing is that, like a character can be they can have a really awful situation and still, have a really upbeat kind of attitude about it. And I think that's important because, um, when you're trying to play these characters realistically, I think that it's a question I've gotten often. How do you play these characters? I don't feel comfortable playing this game because I don't feel comfortable playing these characters. Like this isn't me. And I think it's important to remember that these are people. Like
Yes.
they can have all kinds of attitudes, they can have all kinds of personalities, and their situation is just one part of that. And I think if you play that kind of character, you'll discover that you do kind of inject yourself into them a little bit. You kind of find a style with them that you play towards, like run, play, war is a very specific style. And you kind of learn to appreciate them. You can learn a lot about the characters and also about, I think, people in general, like by playing role-playing games. Yeah, that's what I always tell people. It's like
Yeah.
you step into these shoes, it may be intimidating, but you'll pick something up from them. You'll gain something in the end.
Yes. And speaking of like that kind of I've been trying for a while to make a Dogs in the Vineyard game, which is another game about like marginalization and very specifically to Pack of Strays about marginalization. So in Pack of Strays, the fears about the marginalized, the fear of the poor and the queer and those of other races and stuff like that, they're kind of like validated because they're monsters. And in Dogs in the Vineyard, they're the marginalized kind of like bring biblical plagues, and it's a very similar thing. And I guess what I want to talk to you about is that, like, how do you write a game where people's fears about the other are true?
Well, I haven't played or read Dogs in the Vineyard because I'm awful, but I can definitely talk about this because I've thought about it a lot. So in Pack of Strays, the characters are werewolves and they are monsters. Like you cannot question that your character is a monster. And I mean that in a very serious way. Like I don't mean that in, oh, we're happy, fun monsters or whatever. No, I mean, sometimes, yeah, but your character, when they go out of control, they will do things that you will regret. And it's very much, like about exploring that perspective that others have of marginalized people being monsters, right? Like being deviants, being like undesirable and offensive, that's definitely a part of it. But it's also like about how that perception is so much out of your control, right? Like you don't have any control over all these awful things that people are saying and doing to you and the way they're treating you and the way they come for you, right? Like let's talk real. I mean, marginalized people are the victims of violence, abuse. They're killed. I mean, this is the real world. I mean, they're really hunted down like monsters. And a lot of people are, the marginalized circumstances of their life push them into corners where they also are forced into actions that, you know, the regular person would never be forced into. Like, you know, like a poor person might steal, for example, and it's really easy to come for them for being, you know, like a criminal at that point, right? Like you have, sorry, dogs barking.
It's the pack of strays. That is the most appropriate sound cue.
It is, and it always happens with these guys. But you have like real world realities where, you know, like a disproportionate amount of, you know, like homeless youth are queer. A disproportionate amount of people in prison are people of color. I mean, you can't ignore that, you know, marginalized people, like they're, you know, definitely targeted, right? Like and in that way, you know, as a werewolf, you know, you've got a target on you and you're in a tight spot. And so, yeah, I think that there definitely could be the argument made that, like, I'm sure someone could argue that this is demonizing marginalized people. And yeah, I'm intending to explore that space where you feel demonized, and in a way you are kind of pushed into a darkness. But at the same time, I tried to make it a very kind of safe experience and an exploratory experience, right? Like I feel like the game is very safe. Like you don't have HP or anything. You can't die.
The game is very safe, and there's a lot of really interesting inbuilt safety tools that you've developed. The blackout system.
The blackout system.
Yeah, for
particular.
Blake, who haven't seen this, when wolves go into just their darkest point at any time, someone can just say, "And you black out," and we'll jump forward to when you wake up, kind of thing. And it's a good fast forward safety valve on the
exactly on the system. And it's a safety valve, but it's also a story tool because like the story doesn't end when you black out. Like bad stuff still happens. It's just that we don't have to see that on screen because that's not safe for everyone, and not everyone wants to see that anyway. So yeah, here we go.
And I think the important thing to me is that this is something that's like you're very explicit about in text. I think a couple of times in this text you talk about, if people don't want to see this, here's a couple of veiling tools you can use. Here's a way that you can fast forward. They're built into your mechanics. They're not separate safety tools on top.
Yeah, I think like with this game, safety is really important. So I really liked that I baked something in for that. But I always like suggest people also use whatever safety tools that feel like enable them to play at their best, right? So like I definitely suggest bringing, you know, like if you want to bring an X card to the table, bring an X card to the table. Some people don't play nice with X cards. Bring you know, the fast forward type stuff or try another way type stuff to the table. But there is that blackout mechanic in there, and that is kind of, you know, like the built-in safety mechanic to kind of help you know, get through those really tough spots. And then I'm also really upfront with the tone and the subject matter of the game. Like I even like put like little ratings on there because I very specifically, you know, wanted to be explicit about, you know, like this is, you know, you should know what you're getting into when you sit down and play this game.
Yeah. And I do want to talk about those because that's a situation I'm coming up against at the moment myself as well. You will, I can very much assume that you would have had people who rejected this game based on the tone in the premise, and like I'm not, who found those sharp edges to be a little bit too sharp. How do you deal with people who find those things unattractive and who reject the game for that reason?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had people straight up tell me I don't want to play this game, but I have had people who sit down to play and they don't say anything, but they'll like try to get around it, right? Like I've had someone who, and I'm not going to name names here or anything, but I had someone who, when they're making a character, I used to have this option for like culture as one of the reasons why you're marginalized.
Mhm.
And they picked that and they went with werewolf culture. And I was like, okay, I didn't see that coming, so I'm gonna try and run with it. I should have just said no. But they were like they were like a straight white woman. Um, and their life was like otherwise seemed very good, right? So I was kind of like, oh, that doesn't really fit in the spirit of the game. I didn't say anything. I should have just said something because I'm sure they would have appreciated the heads up because I don't think people do that kind of thing intentionally necessarily. I don't know. But yeah, I think some people it just goes over their head. Like maybe they just don't have the thought that maybe they should try, like playing something different, I think a lot of people want to play something safe. Like they want to play a safe character. And they have a really hard time picking those choices that don't really line up with their point of view, right? Or their own situation, maybe. Yeah, I mean, and I have a hard time with it sometimes. Like I don't play a lot of female characters. And when I do, I play them completely different than my male characters. So I get it. It's difficult, but I think that like every now and then, especially if you play a lot of games. I mean, if you just play like rarely, like if you just have your own like campaign that you're doing, and you just want to like play a character that you enjoy, then yeah, I mean, do what works for you. In Pack of Strays, you're going to have to make them marginalized in some way. So try to find like a way that you can step into. But yeah, I mean, I get it. Yeah. If you're playing a lot of games, then definitely try going out of your shoes more often.
So one thing you can't get away from when you're talking about like packs and alphas and stuff like that is this idea of dominance, of like strength and physical dominance and stuff like that. Pack of Strays approaches that really interestingly in that Darcy, the alpha, just isn't there from the start of the game. Like just
Yeah.
Everyone owes him everything, and then he just like never exists in the game.
You know what's funny? You gendered out Darcy as male right now, which is cool because I think that's what a lot of people get from Lasers and Feelings. But what's really funny is like when I run Pack of Strays, it's like 90% of the time people gender Darcy as a female. So it's really nice because and Darcy's never really on screen, but there's this strong female character in the background, right, of play, and I feel like it really informs the play and pushes it even more so in that kind of marginalized direction, right? Yeah, so that was something I really enjoyed. But yeah, you are right. The alpha is missing, right? When you're playing Pack of Strays, like they're off screen, and what you're left with is a pack with no real alpha in charge. You kind of have the alpha's orders, maybe, like that characters are supposed to follow, but the politics get involved, and like the pack politics, and like you gain these alpha streams as you play, and the connotation is like, I think I'm not sure if I say it explicitly, but it's like, who's going to be the next alpha? And so you have like this element of, like where that leadership role is kind of front and center, like, right? Like that leadership, that hole, that gap that needs to be filled, right? Like that role is hanging over the pack kind of as you're playing a bit.
Yeah, and it's interesting that there's no mechanic for someone to step into that role, right? Like, I guess my question is, what does the end of a game of Pack of Strays look like? What is success?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. What is the end game of Pack of Strays? And I think that's going to be different for every table that sits down to play it. I think for some people, they're going to find Darcy, and that'll be it, right? Other groups, I mean, Darcy's going to just never be found, or they're not going to go that direction, or Darcy will be dead or something. And someone like they'll play and this alpha stuff will be played with, and I imagine some people will have a conversation, at the end of the game talking about, okay, well, where does our pack go? Does someone become alpha? And I think that is what I prefer. Because it becomes like almost democratic in a way. It's almost like if you're playing the game and those alpha moments are coming out and you're playing with alpha strings, then it's almost like you've already done the work to become the leader. So I feel like it's a lot better than to just assert the leadership, right? It's kind of more of like a push and pull, like the whole strings mechanic. And it's not always going to be, like respectable the way that it happens. Sometimes it's going to be very ugly, but it's definitely not going to be one person dominating the field, right? Like it's going to be the entire pack playing with those strings.
It's going to be very messy, yes.
And some of it is going to actually be very, very, positive. There are very positive ways that you can use the strings. You can help people, regain control using those strings. So, yeah, I think that when you're playing, you'll definitely see a lot of different interpretations of what alpha behavior looks like, and you'll see the good and you'll see the bad.
and very bad. I mean, like we were talking before about the monstrousness. The letting out the beast tags are like eviscerate life, dominate physically, drip your sex. Like they're pretty visceral, dangerous stuff to play with.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, when the beast comes out, the beast, is primal. Yeah, it's very much an animal, and not just any animal. It's like the most rabies infested animal. I don't know what you'd call it. Well, rabid, okay. Very rabid.
So I want to talk about this line in here, which I absolutely love, which is number 3. If 3 dice succeed, you get a critical success. If you're being too smooth and the others call you on it, let the beast out now or else lose an alpha string and gain a control. What I love about that and what I want to ask you about is the other players, the other members of your pack are going to look to you and be like, no, you're not being like destructive enough. You're not, you are too much in control.
Yeah.
Have you seen that used a lot at play? Have you seen a lot of people?
No. Honestly, no.
Yeah, that's
but I want it to be in play, and that's why I put it there, and I love it, because the idea is that these are people who are not in control, and if you're in a pack, then you're supposed to relate to each other, right? Like that's the idea. And so you can like straight up say, I'm not relating to you. You're being too good at this.
Yeah.
You're too in control of everything. You know what? This is bullshit. You're not one of us. The rest of us are having a really hard time here. And you can just kind of reject them a little, and you can push them further into that corner to where they're really going to fail when they get to a situation where they actually have to be feral, right?
Yeah.
So
it's real great. I would love to see that in play. I'd love to see that conversation.
Yeah, I've definitely seen situations in play where someone was too smooth and they failed a feral roll because of it. Like they actually had to do something badass, and they didn't have it in them. But it's really open game. So if you're really creative, you can get pretty far on one side of the spectrum. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But the bell curve, the design bell curve thing, right? Like that doesn't feel like it's the intent of the game. I feel like if you sit down with Pack of Strays and you're like, I'm going to be smooth all the time, you are playing just the wrong game.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not a game designer in the sense that I do a lot of math stuff. No, not really.
Oh, actually, very good question. Talking about that not a lot of math stuff. You worked with Jason Cordova for a lot of this. Did a lot of the dev editing.
I didn't get any dev editing for Pack of Strays stuff, but I did get feedback on the stuff that went into Codex, just little bits of, this isn't really, flying too well, for print or whatever. And honestly, it was nothing really like extensive. It was just like, we're going to leave this out because it's just not relevant. Nothing really. I wouldn't say it was really anything really too consequential. Yeah, what I have gotten developmental editing from him on is like my upcoming projects that I'm kind of working on right now. But yeah, the thing is that with Pack of Strays is that, you know, I was working on it since 2016, right? So, and I was pretty open with you know, like developing it and playtesting it, and I asked for a lot of feedback over its lifetime, and I got a lot of great feedback from the Gauntlet community, specifically in the Slack. That was absolutely vital to where it ended up going. Like just as an example, you know, we talked about how it's kind of lasers and feelings hack, and like how it's kind of different from that. Well, you know, like I think it was Yoshi Krillman who gave me like the feedback that I should be very explicit that this is not a lasers and feelings game. Like, you know, it's different, and that you should get invested. And so I put that in the game, and you know, in the end, you know, like it's kind of emphasized that you should really get into to playing your character and thinking about the long game rather than, you know, like a more lasers and feelings kind of, you know, like one-shotty kind of experience.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's really clear and explicit here. You basically just say get emotionally invested and explore pack life, which is beautiful. I really want to get into just everything more about Pack of Strays, and I can't because I have so much other stuff. So Drawing the Owl is, as I always say, it's a vlog about like failure and about how we succeed through these failures. So I need to talk about Out of This World.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
For people watching, Out of This World still has a G+ community. You can still get on there.
It's true.
You could still see the 33-page document that is all about this. Oh man, what is it? It's like Magic the Gathering PBTA, I guess, is what I got from it.
Yeah, but like way more. I think what I was aiming for was like a way more visceral, kind of gut punchy Magic the Gathering in a way.
Okay, so can you give me like a 20-second on like what your goal was when you sat down to write Out of This World, and then are you able to tell me why you ceased development on it?
Okay, so what I always have to start with when I talk about Out of This World is that it was a game that was very inspired. And well, Magic the Gathering is like the pop culture reference that I always go to with it. The thing is I had a dream that kind of led to it. And basically in this dream, I was trapped, and like this red staircase like appeared in the floor. And I was able to walk down it, and I ended up escaping it and going to like somewhere else. I can't remember where anymore. But that idea was kind of like the seed that led to this game, like a really surreal kind of game about, you know, traveling between places, you know, like between dimensions. And so that's very similar to Magic the Gathering with the planeswalking. But Magic the Gathering is very fantastical kind of aesthetic. And while that can pop up in Out of This World, what I was really aiming for was a game that kind of plays with identity and the erasure of identity as you kind of leave your reality behind, as you escape to other places, as you're like taken to other places, and how you're kind of subjected to trauma that overwrites you, right? And just playing with, that's what I really was going for, was playing with identity. I mean, you have like this your character sheet has like a mandala that all of your kind of attributes are on, and that kind of influences the bonus or the negative that you get to your dice roll based on where stuff is on that mandala. And it was a bit complex, but I liked the idea of it, and I still kind of do. But the game got real mechanical, real messy with the mechanics, like in a bad way. And the bloat was very strong. I did 2 playtests of it. I did one at KublaCon, where we played for 6 hours, which is a ridiculous amount of time for a game session. They had a good time. We didn't really get into the kind of aesthetic I was going for, so that was my big issue with it. And then I ran it for Jason and some other Gauntlet members. This was when I was first joining the Gauntlet. This was like so long ago, back in like 2016.
Yeah,
I guess.
this draft is dated the 7/21/2016.
Yeah, around then. And it just did not go well. Like character creation took so long and we didn't really get into play. So I just, like I still think about like the themes of that game and I really want to explore it, but it would look very different than that game. Like I feel like there's just a few elements I would take from there. But I feel like I've learned a lot as a game designer when it comes to like even PBTA games. Like I wouldn't design a PBTA game like that anymore. Just because, back then there was a very different attitude at that. I don't know, maybe I wasn't exposed to the idea that you should really watch your moves carefully. And I think that was pretty evident in them, right? And I was still kind of transitioning into the mindset for, conversational storytelling in a way. But yeah, it was this huge piece of work that I put a lot of time into and I dropped it because it was just not a place I wanted to do. And I had other ideas that I wanted to move on to. And, if you're particularly inspired, then you've got this other thing calling to you, then sometimes you're going to jump ship.
Absolutely. And I kind of have those moves up now just as a bit of a visual thing. I think they're beautifully written moves. I think there's a lot to it. But interestingly, when I went through Out of This World and I read this document a couple of times, you're right, there is a lot in here, both in terms of like physical and thematic density. But the one thing I can't see that I was looking for everywhere was something that spoke to Pack of Strays. What impact do you think that Out of This World has had on Pack of Strays?
Honestly, the connection between Out of This World and Pack of Strays, let's see. I think that they are really different, but the idea in Out of This World is that instead of approaching it from the idea of people like being marginalized, Out of This World is a game that deals with trauma and identity. And I feel like that is not a far call from kind of the same kind of tone in a way, right? Like you're playing a character who, you start in a situation that is very like far from ideal or utopian in any way. And you are, over the course of play, you gain trauma on your character sheet. So it is very much kind of a dark kind of journey in a way. Somewhat similar, I guess, in that respect.
And what oh man, can you talk to me about that feeling? Because I'm terrified I'm gonna have to experience it myself. Can you talk to me about that feeling of looking at something that you poured a lot of work into and there is evidence of a lot of man hours that's gone into Out of This World? What did it feel like to just realize it wasn't working and that you had to move on?
It's heartbreaking, right? This is a baby. I mean, it honestly, like, it's such a punch, right? Like, it's a hard hit to play a game and realize that this isn't the right project for right now, and to have to shelve something. It's hard. It's really hard. And it takes, I think what it really helps is when you have like additional ideas to jump onto, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I would suggest to any designer never just work on one thing. Always work on more than one thing, because you're going to need the pickup that your other projects are going to give you to get up from that fall that you had with this other one. So, keep your options open, try to have an upbeat attitude about whatever you're working on, even if you're jumping to something completely different and completely new. There's always tomorrow, whatever game comes tomorrow to you, there's always that. And, uh, there's always going to be more game designs. There's always going to, and time is just, time is just a thing that you're going to have to sacrifice to, get to a good design. I would never say that I wasted my time working on Out of This World. I would say that, I gained a lot of insight into the kind of games that I want to create. Like I learned that I don't want to make a really, heavy mechanically game that's very mechanically extensive, but it has a lot of like for example, PBTA style moves. I'm working on a PBTA game right now called Deep Dark Bloodlines, and it doesn't have a lot of moves like that. And so, yeah, I think that it's definitely, a part of it to have those things that just, you're going to put them on the shelf. And that's not to say that you're killing them, right? Because it may just be that, and in the future, something will change, like something will happen in your head or something will happen in the community or something where, suddenly there's a huge space for this game or you get the way to make it click, right? And that's when you can bring it back in. Like, I'm hopeful that someday, like I can approach Out of This World and make it something that works. It would probably be very different. But the themes of it are very inspired for me and kind of personal. So, I mean, I wouldn't say it's not out of my head. It's definitely in my head still. And it's important to me, but it's something that I'm just tucking away. And I've got several things I'm working on right now, so it's kind of tucked away indefinitely.
I mean, let's talk about this. That's awesome. So you have two projects running at the moment, which seem to be kind of they seem to be like breakoffs of a single project. So you've got the beatdown system that you're developing, and then two games on top of that: Hello High Water and Colony Far Out.
Yeah. So yeah, they both use the kind of the same system, I guess you could say. Yeah.
Is this your thing about never be developing just one thing? You've decided to kind of write two games side by side. Is that?
Well, so I started writing Colony Far Out first, like way back in 2016 again. Very important year.
Big year.
Yeah, and that one I started writing first, and I kind of came up with this idea for like a different kind of play style, like where you say things in beats, and it's more about like the delivery and like you're role playing, but you're performing it in a certain way, like. And then like at a certain point, like other people cut in, and it's kind of a trade-off of control of this tense conversation when you're in a charge situation. So that was kind of something I wanted to explore with the system. And so I wanted to, push those mechanics and see different ways that they could be expressed. And I have all these like subsystems inside of it. And so I was thinking about different ways to emphasize those. And so that's why I started working on Hell or High Water as well. It's a different setting completely, and it emphasizes different parts of the system. Like it emphasizes a lot more about, like the suspicions, because you are, you have a fallen monster patron that brought you back to life, and you are subject to corruption. So it's very much a different focus, I feel. But yeah, I totally did like basically reskin it in a way. But yeah, I would say with this system, it's I can't not call it a game system. It's a game system, and I feel like that turns a lot of people off, because a lot of people are like, it's not system first, right? But the system is just a means. It's just a medium for you to tell the stories of your characters, because the way that you engage the system is with these things called approaches. And those approaches are completely informed by your character creation and maybe stuff that you pick up during play. So, I mean, you create a character by basically picking from lists and kind of creating this little bit of information about your character, and from that you create your approaches. So And the approaches is just like you give it a name and you give it some stage direction. So you're literally acting out that approach when you interrupt with it. So
yeah,
it's
ritualized interruption is a really big part of the beatdown system.
exactly,
like
yeah.
You notify others that you want to be interrupted, which I love. Pat's watching us at the moment, and it feels very perilous phase Swords of That Master to me in a way that I really enjoy.
And neither of which I've played.
And we've got to play Swords. We'll do Sunday AM Swords at some point, I promise.
Yeah, I should definitely jump on that bandwagon. Yeah, because I've heard nothing but good things about Swords, so gotta do it.
And one day we'll talk to Epi, and that's fine. We'll talk about Swords. But for you, I really want to talk about it. So, your playtest at the moment for Colony Fire, this is something I want to drill into a little bit more. You said that when you played Out of This World, you had a really poor experience with character creation. Is that why you're focusing so heavily on character creation now?
It's I would say like this is related in a way because there's always that trouble with character creation in that you invest a lot of time and you don't get a lot out of it, right? So of course, it's something
do you mean as a designer or as a player? You invest a lot of time into
it. As a player, yeah. If you know, I love a really detailed character creator. Okay. Like honestly, in a game, like I love getting into those details, into those lists or whatever. And so it's a trade-off though, because you're adding complexity. And no matter what kind of setup a game has for its character creation, if you have a lot of complexity, then it needs to, you know, be snappy. It needs to snap quick into play, and it needs to have payoff, right? So that's primarily what I'm looking at for, you know, the beatdown games is like, you know, is it snappy and does it pay off? And the feedback I've gotten, you know, people have said like it is a little slow right now, so I've got to like speed it up a bit, and I have ideas for how to do that. But I've also had people who say they really appreciate it. So and to name drop Yoshi again, he's like, you know, character creation is part of play too. So, you know, like you are getting something out of it. You are getting value out of like creating a character. So, and I agree with that. But at the same time, I mean, everyone wants to play a little bit when they sit down at a session. So it's a little bit quicker. It's good. It's good. Out of This World had this problem where it took a long time to make a character, and it doesn't help that the game kind of had this kind of unconventional kind of obtuse character sheet thing that you kind of had to explain, right? Like the mandala of it. People did not get that right away. So
that's definitely one of the benefits Pack of Strays has, that you can just be like werewolves, be feral or smooth. Like
that's like one of the biggest pros that I've heard people say about running Pack of Strays are like, oh, it's so quick to pick up. Like I think Joe Beeson said that, and he's like, oh, I just want to run Pack of Strays because I can just go with it. I can't remember his exact words, but he basically like really liked that about the game. So yeah, definitely a pro to have a quick start. I think that where that gets kind of hard is that when you want to go for a particular kind of story or a particular kind of experience, then you often have to like push a little further than that. Right? So like in Hell or High Water, like it's got the same kind of premise. Like there's something marginal, you're marginalized for some reason, like you're targeted for a reason, right? Like your character in Hell or High Water, you were killed like before the start of the game. Like you're brought back to life, you're a revenant, you're brought back to life by these huge epic, you know, monsters or demons or whatever they're called, the Fallen, and you never meet them. They're kind of in the background, ominous, kind of remote monsters. They bring you back to life.
Sorry, just while we're talking, you've got Do Not Distribute on it. Are you okay if I bring up that title page of Hell or High Water, which has the Revenant down?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, that's fine.
And while you talk, I just really want to have that up because it's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So the thing is that you have this story that kind of starts, that's already kind of started when you get into your character. I mean, that's where you kind of have to extend the character creation a bit, because I could not just start Hell or High Water with, oh yeah, you were killed by these pious assholes for being different. and not have a little bit more there to it, right? Like I love leaving spaces, and the character creation for this does leave spaces, but I had to put in some lists, at least to like pull in some details to just make it a little bit more special, your situation, like why you were killed. And Hell or High Water especially, like that's a game where I was like, oh, I have an idea for this world, and so I'm going to do some world building. Like this is a setting, this is a very specific kind of setting. So there's also establishing that is part of the introducing the game and in character creation, is that you have to establish certain things. So it's definitely something I'm paying attention to. How long is this taking? Now, Hell or High Water, it's funny enough, I feel like the character creation for that actually went smoother than Colony Far Out. So, but I also had half the number of players. So, I mean, in the end, like if you have a big table, I think that character creation usually takes longer than expected anyway. But the thing is that I don't feel like it's complex. It's just it's just a lot of words that you're dealing with, right? So it's really easy to adjust it in the future. So I'm feeling pretty good about the character creation, actually. Like I'm really satisfied with it, because the feedback I've gotten has really just been like people enjoyed making their characters, and they were able to make their approaches really easy. And like it's not getting like I had the trouble I had has always been right after character creation, where I'm teaching the game, and that's what I knew I was going to have trouble with that going in. So it's just a matter of like finding the right way to do that. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about character creation this time around.
The things that I have seen put out, which is the beautiful character layout that you have, and it's very obviously influenced by character keepers and by like Gauntlet online play culture. But those pictures you're putting up of like with like Edge, Primary Die, and then their approaches. Like that, it's like it's very simple and very approachable and grokkable.
The characters sheets, I guess you could call them. The characters in these games are not complicated. There's not a lot of mechanical weight to them. Like they're complicated. They're complex as characters, but mechanically, it's not hard to grok what's going on. I mean, so that I really appreciate about it. That's a completely opposite situation from Out of This World. Out of This World had like huge character sheets with so much on them, and it was quite difficult to explain it and to handle it. Like people could not get a handle on it. But I mean, I think that like that part of what drove that, and part of what goes into all my games, is just like making interesting characters is really fun. And I'm really excited about what my new games are doing. I've already had good feedback, like people telling me like, oh, just from making a character for Colony Fire Out, I feel like it's already more interesting than all the characters in the latest Mass Effect game.
Oh, that's so good.
So yeah, a little bit of a burn, but
can't throw shade on my YouTube show, man.
I love Mass Effect. Mass Effect is actually the #1 inspiration for Colony Far Out. So I'm definitely happy to hear that people are feeling that connection there. And I think that I'm really excited to see like more characters people come up with when I'm playtesting, because they've been fantastic so far, and so out there, and exactly what you'd expect in that kind of like space dealing with actual aliens and stuff. They're super weird. I love it.
It's actually, I'm speaking about, Blake brought this up in chat, which is what got me thinking about it. When you mention different like cultural touchstones, in all of your games, you've got that except for Pack of Strays, which is really interesting because you also approach werewolves from a different angle than I think most of them. So for most views of werewolves are either really, really like sexy masculinity or really, really toxic masculinity. And you don't approach werewolves as like violence and men and dominance. You approach it as no, I don't. I feel like
while my werewolves are sexy and while
Oh,
they
they're
can
sexy.
yeah, no, I definitely didn't really have a lot of like touchstones for Pack of Strays because, you know, like the classic monster movies, it's not that. That's not this game. And um as far as like other things go, like honestly, like I didn't really come across any media. I'm sure there might be something kind of similar. Maybe, I don't know. Like I know there's the werewolf games like by White Wolf, like Werewolf the Apocalypse. I never played those, so I can't really say. My impression is that they have a very different focus. Like it's a much more fantastical kind of situation with the werewolves being kind of I got like this druidic impression from them. Like there's a like werewolf culture is like a very important thing in that game.
My background is werewolf culture.
And it's not like that in Pack of Strays. It's like, no, you're people culture and you're kind of dealing with the worst of it. Yeah, I don't know. I can't really decide anything. And I think I think a lot of designers maybe, I don't know, get caught up in this idea that you have to have touchstones. Like you can't just create something. I think that when you're doing like world design, uh, it sometimes the references are going to be kind of thin, right? Like you may have like a visual idea that you kind of pull things from. You may kind of like be kind of working with like kind of an analogy, right? That and you might create something kind of new, like Pack of Strays. You know, I can't give you a good one. I can't give you a good touchstone for Pack of Strays. I would say play it.
Yeah, well, I think the touchstone for Pack of Strays is like the marginalized experience, right? Like I think there is nothing really as close to it as itself.
Yeah, that's kind of like the pitch, and in a way is like, oh, you're this marginalized person and your life is awful in a way because of that. Like you have all these challenges that you deal with. You're part of this community, of course, and that helped. Oh, and you're a werewolf. So that's kind of the pitch of it. And I think that's really appealing because it's underdogs. You're a bunch of underdogs, and people love underdog stories. So yeah, that's definitely it's kind of more of a pitch than it is a touchstone, right? Hell or High Water is kind of the same way. Like the tagline for that is a heavy metal hack slash to fight the divine apocalypse.
So good.
I cannot give you a good touchstone for that. Like people are like, oh, what about like the game Brutal Legend, or you know, like, and I'm like, aesthetically maybe there's kind of a similarity, and like aesthetically I can point to like games, like old games like Legend of the Dragoon, which is like this really old PlayStation game. And I'm like, it's kind of like that, but honestly I feel like it's just gonna like come out and play. You're gonna kind of get that heavy metal feel because like you're powered by a huge fucking godly monster. So I mean that's pretty, and your weapons, you're like playing with like machine guns and like if you want to pull up that weapon list, that's fine.
I'd love to. Do you know which page it's on? Because you don't have bookmarks in this PDF, so you're on.
I'm awful.
You are. Well, you know what I should do?
It's at the end of the character creation, I think.
Here it is. Choose a starting weapon. Yep, brilliant.
They're so awful.
Good. They are.
And this
is absolutely awful.
It's very much like alpha, so this may change, but you can kind of see that you're creating a character, you're going to end up with something that I would hope feels kind of heavy metal to you.
Guitar feels pretty heavy. Drill arm.
It's definitely inspired by ridiculous weapons that you would get in a game like Soul Calibur, you know. yeah, I've really enjoyed the characters people have made for this, and I've gotten the feedback that it's heavy metal. So
Good. Good.
yeah. I mean, and that's the thing is that like you like don't spend a lot of time, stressing about, like finding that perfect reference. You shouldn't stress a ton about pitching your game. I mean, yeah, it's important. Like you need to be able to pitch your game. You kind of need to set expectations.
Mm-hmm.
But you should really focus more on creating a good experience. And if you have an idea in your head of the kind of experience you want to create, then that can be enough to drive the design and to call to people, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I mean, it's okay to make something without a lot of reference points and just kind of make something new.
I've been using one really like close reference point for my design, and then this morning at like 3 a.m. I just ended up on Twitter just ranting about how it's not what I want to be close to at all. Like that we completely deviate on the core conceit of violence.
Right. I mean, it's a bit of a trap too. Like I would definitely say if you are really inspired by something, you should step back and look at, how much you're trying to recreate it, right? Like, is that specifically what you want to do? Like, do you want to recreate that? And if you don't, if that's not your primary goal, then you should, take it very lightly as a reference point and zero in on what kind of experience you want to create and what kind of stories you want to tell. Yeah. Like you really interrogate yourself about those two things. Like, how do you want people to feel when they're playing your game? Right? Like the all important question, how do you feel? Like, how do you want people to answer that question?
Yeah, no, and yeah. I super look forward to figuring that out. So I'm very interested in how you define success. You gave me some of the best advice I've heard about game design, which is, do you think every painter puts or do you think a painter puts every painting in the gallery? Which is a very, very apt piece of advice.
Yeah.
Do you consider Pack of Strays to be a success?
I do. And the reason why is because people latched onto it. Mm-hmm. And I've heard, once you hear about people bringing your game to conventions, then that's a really rewarding feeling. People play it. People tell me that it was like when I ran it at Big Bad Con this last year, I got feedback that it was the highlight of their experience.
Wow, that's very special.
That's very special feeling and totally ego boosting. And, I'm not going to say it's a perfect game. I'm going to say it's a particularly original game. Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of original, but you know what? Play the games that you want to make, that you want to play. And if other people want to play them, if it works, if other people want to play them, they will play them. Mm-hmm. And that's success. Have you made a game that you want to play that works, and then are other people playing it, right? Like that's what all matters. I've talked to people, like trying to figure out what game to make. They're like, oh, I want to make a game, but I don't think anyone wants to play this. And I'm like, do you want to play it? Sure, maybe no one has made a game about this, but do you want to play it? Like, are you just making something because you think it hasn't been done before? Like, I think a lot of people, like I've seen this like with various systems, right? Like, oh, this system hasn't been done with this setting yet, so I'm going to make this game for this setting.
Yeah.
But do I know, like, do I have an experience that I want to play when I do this, or am I just doing this because it hasn't been done, right? So something I definitely think that people need to interrogate, like do you want to play your game? Like, do you really want to play your game? Like really? Do you really want to play your game? Like, I'm not sure. So that's always been my thing with my games. Like I had an idea of an experience, idea of an aesthetic, idea of a story that I wanted to play, and that's why I made my games. Like, Out of This World didn't work out. Like, I did it wrong. Mm-hmm. But I wanted something out of that, like very specifically. Like, this is the art of game design, and I feel like we don't talk about the art very often. We don't talk about the intent, and there's a lot of different ways to think about it. When you're talking about experiential design, like are you designing for the experience of your audience? But I feel like expression is part of it. Like, what are you expressing as a game designer, as a writer? Like, are you just creating a really lavish setting that people can run around in, or is there something more? Is there an experience, a story that you are steering them towards, and that is important to you? Is that important to you? Is that something that you want at the table? Yeah, it's important stuff to think about.
and I don't think it's something that you and I can answer, unfortunately, as much as we try. But that comment about like game design as an art versus as a product and as a business is a really interesting one, because like so many people would define success, and I've been in the trap before of defining success as a product. If I can get a Kickstarter off the ground, or if I can, sell one copy of this or whatever. But that's not what started me down this path.
I'm sure it's nice. I'm sure it's absolutely fantastic to get a lot of money from a Kickstarter, and to like be in maybe you can get to a position to where you can do that full time. I'm sure that's great. But I do not make games for money. As much as I would love to do that, I would love it, right? But I do it because I love it. I do games because I like to make games. I wouldn't even say it's completely consensual on my part. Like, I feel a drive to make games, right? So like I get a lot of stress. I stress a lot about it, like about how much I want to work on my games and how much time I have to do it in, right? Like, I have a full-time job aside from working on games, and I have other parts of my life that I have to give attention to. So like I have to like carve out time to work on my games because I feel it. But yeah, I mean, I am certainly not a capitalist about it. I know that my games are not my mainstream. So whatever fortune comes my way, I'll try to accept it. But yeah.
So what's your definition of success for Colony Far Out and Hell or High Water now? Like,
right now, my goal for success is that they work.
right. So as long and like, how do you define that? How do you define that they work? Those old games are perfectly functional.
Can you like, this is the thing, we talk about products. You brought up that word, right? So I have this idea. Okay, the product is not the game. The product is what the game creates. So
the feeling that you wanted to impart.
It's not just a feeling. Like, can you walk away from the game table with having created something, right? Like, as designers,
I'm all
as designers, we are authors. We are the spark.
Yes. Okay. I've been talking about this for a couple of weeks now, about the idea that like we don't write games, we write systems and settings, and then people play games. And
we write systems and settings, but we also write prompts and direction. So I feel like it's important to think about it more than just like a bunch of paragraphs about a world and then a bunch of rolling dice. Like, if you're a game designer, then you're not creating a simulation. You're not creating a tactical. If you're a story game designer, you're creating a story. So, if you're a role-playing game designer, then you're designing roles that people can step into and play them out. And so, I'm sure some people have some ideas about, that can be a mechanical experience as a simulation, and I'm sure that's. I enjoy those from time to time myself, but I feel like from an immersive role-playing story gaming perspective, putting that lens on it, that's one lens of many, but putting that lens on it, you know, you are you are creating something that people can sit down at the table and make something out of themselves, right? You're creating a toolbox. You're putting a bunch of direct writers' chairs in a writing room, to use Jason's analogy. I think it's Jason's, of the writing room analogy. You know, like you're allowing people to create an experience and create a story from what you give them. So there are a lot of store games, great ones, that don't have the kind of mechanics system that a lot of people think of, right, as a system. Like it's just a bunch of prompts and you run with it and it's improv, and that's perfectly valid.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Fall of Magic is an
now,
excellent game.
what was that?
Fall of Magic is an excellent game,
Yeah,
and that is very
yeah.
much just
I mean,
prompts.
I would argue that Fall of Magic is a system, but I'm thinking of maybe Kingdom is maybe less of an identifiable system. Have you played that one?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, maybe check that out. I think it's Kingdom. Oh my gosh, I can't remember. I may be completely wrong there. Oh, I can't remember the name of it. I think it's one of his games though.
Is
But
this
anyway,
Ben Robbins?
I think it's a Ben Robbins game.
Yeah, yeah, it looks like Kingdom.
It may be the one after that he made. I can't remember.
Was that Follow? Was that
Follow? That's
Yeah.
what I'm thinking of.
Okay? Yeah, no, I have played Follow, and
You know what I'm talking about, right?
I
Like the system is very light, right?
Yeah.
So you can design a system that creates a certain experience and creates a certain story. And if you're trying to create a certain experience, a certain story, I would say, like, if you want part of that experience to be playing with dice and things like that, that's important. I mean, part of the experience can be rolling dice. People like to roll dice. They're shiny little objects. That can be part of your experience. Also think about how else they can contribute to the experience. What kind of feeling that you evoke when you roll the dice? How do you feel when you roll the dice? Do you feel trepidation? Do you feel badass? I mean, there's different ways you can feel when you roll dice. How can you inform that? You know, those are the kind of questions you're going to be asking yourself as a game designer when you're working with mechanics.
So I'm interested in, and Pat had the same question. Where do you draw the line between a prompt and a mechanic, especially in story games where the line between them is so thin? Because I mentioned Fall of Magic, which I think is, and I mean it no disrespect when I say it. I think it is a series of beautiful, excellent prompts, well constructed to make a gorgeous story. And your response was that has a system.
A mechanic is part of a machine. So are there dynamics? Is it tying into something else? If it's just a question, you could say, like, it's part of a story system, right? Like, this question is a mechanic in a story system to drive something in that story. You can make that argument. I think that if you don't have that particular attitude going in with designing those prompts, then you're maybe it's maybe a bit nebulous, right? Because writing stories, if you're writing a fiction, then I'm sure everyone knows that fiction is not a very calculated process. It's kind of a bit, like you're kind of pulling in a bunch of ideas onto the page into a kind of a story. I don't think a lot of writers have, like, post-it note maps exactly where everything. I don't think a lot of writers work like that. And so the idea of a story being very mechanical, I don't think that is something that is very prevalent or good, maybe. Like, stories are more of like a expression, right? Like, it's more of a direct expression, rather than an engine that kind of creates something, right? And so I feel like if you're having a lot of prompts, you're kind of mapping the answers in a way towards a desired goal. Like, you're designing experience, but it's because you're like putting in very specific questions towards it. And it's important to do that in story games, and I do it in my games. And I have pick from lists that do that. Now, where mechanics come into play is they're like, okay, on top of these prompts that we're giving you, we're aiming to create an experience at the table, right? What kind of experience at the table are we creating? And you can even look at Dungeons and Dragons with this. So, like, what kind of experience do you have at the table when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons and your character's HP goes down to 2 HP? You might be stressing a little bit. And so I feel like that's something that's maybe overlooked in the trad OSR type space is you can't argue that they don't have an experience at the table because they have a very strong experience at the table. Now, you may not like the stories they create, but you can't argue that they don't have an experience at the table. So that is definitely something I think a lot of designers who are trying to bridge that gap think about experience design. Think about making games as an experience versus just games as a storytelling engine, right? And that's what I try to do with my games. Is I try to, I work with mechanics. Pack of Strays has alpha strings. That's a mechanic. It is, very much so. It has dynamics with the dice pools. It, has dynamics with the storytelling. It has dynamics with your control level. I mean, it's all connected in Pack of Strays. So, yeah, a mechanic is definitely part of like, think of it as like part of a greater whole. Like, it's contributing to something. It's driving something. It's like a pulley that's moving a belt throughout a system, right? Like there's currency between different mechanics. Those dynamics are what make a system. So, if your prompt is doing that in a very intentional way, then I would call it a mechanic in a way. Yeah. Is it part of an engine?
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a very valid question, and yeah, so I would say if you have a bunch of questions, if you have a bunch of prompts, is that a system? Are those mechanics? And I'm tempted to say no, because I feel like mechanics are distinct.
Is that an important delineation for you to make?
In a way. I don't think it's a really important question to answer. I think it's important as a designer to be aware of dynamics.
Yeah.
Of dynamics between mechanics. And I think that
what
make dynamics interesting as an experience at the table is because the mechanics are different in a way, I guess. So I would say that with questions, you're defining truth, and maybe you can think about, if you really want to have a really story-focused game, different ways to define truth. And you're defining truth about the world, you're adding to the story. So different ways that you can do that, and different ways they might impact each other. And I'm sure you could make a system like that, thinking about it in that attitude. But I would say that if you're a story game designer, I would look real closely at just random questions and trying to make an experience at the table with just random questions. Like, I think it cannot be random. It has to be very intentional.
Yes. Yeah, I think intentional design is a super important umbrella that I work under. I don't think anything could be random and resolve any better than.
Well, I should say not random in that they're uninspired. I'm sure they're very inspired questions, but there's a difference between inspired and intentional.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So one of the things I like to get to is to talk about the things that I pulled out of this, which is first off, you said a beautiful line, which I love, which is, it's not perfect, but it's precious. Talking about the pack itself, and I love it just as a good game design philosophy for me. Secondly, talking about like that not working on one thing, keeping things spread out. But finally, and I think most importantly, and I wish we could talk about this for another 4 hours, game design as an art form and as self-expression versus as a capitalist enterprise. I think is a very interesting way to look at things. You and Haley from Storybrewers both said very similar things about writing for the table experience, about designing with that end in mind. And that's definitely something I'm pulling out of this. But with that sort of stuff in mind, what's the one piece of advice that you'd like to pass on to me and to other designers that are watching this? There's probably two of them. What advice would you like to pass on to us to make our
yeah, make the games you want to play. Is something I've already said. It's something I always give to designer people who are looking for advice. And like, make the game you want to play, make the experience you want at the table, make the story that you want to be told. Ask yourself hard questions. It's very important. And work on different things. Be exposed to stuff, like expose yourself to different design, get yourself out of a box. Like I said, it's going to be good to jump on something else if this doesn't work. It's emotionally, as a designer, it can be very fraught. Having a pickup, in another project, being able to jump into that is going to be very helpful for you.
You said ask yourself the hard questions as a designer. What would you consider to be the hardest question you've had to ask yourself?
Is it fun? Are people having a good time? Are people stressed at the table? Are people frustrated? Is this a valuable use of time? Is this a worthwhile use of time for people? Are people absorbed? Are people distracted? Are people, do people care about understanding? Do people care about playing right now? Or, are they invested at all? Those are things you need to pay attention to as a designer, especially when you're playtesting. Do people get it? Do people want it? Did they just agree to play a game because they saw it, that it was open? Stuff should click. Are there clicks? Are things clicking? At least some of the things clicking. What is clicking? What is working? What can you push further? What can you drive? What can drive this experience to what you want it to be? Can you zero in on that? Can you zero in on what's good here, right? Because there's usually something, right? Even in Out of This World, there's something good there.
There's a lot of good in there.
Yeah. So breathe, take care of yourself. Sit back and just relax with your game design, and you'll go further with it. You'll kill lots of mechanical babies. But so long as you're focused on what kind of experience, what kind of storytelling that you want to express at the table, then that's what matters.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. If people want more of you, and they absolutely should, first off, they can buy Codex Beasts, which contains Pack of Strays. It's a $5 on drive-through. That dog growl is fantastic, talking about Pack of Strays. But secondly, where else on the internet can people find you and your thoughts on RPGs?
I am on Google Plus. I don't post, but you can find me on there, Phillip Wessels. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Popper, Pawper. Yeah, I hang out in the Gauntlet a lot. So if you're on the Slack, then you'll probably see me.
And you're currently running playtests through there on
Gauntlet Hangouts. Yeah, I have some playtests on through the rest of the month. There's some slots open in Hell or High Water. I think there's like one slot, and then I'm going to be posting more next month. So keep a heads up, and yeah, you can maybe jump on one of those and play with me.
And I think that would be a valuable design experience to anyone, up to and including myself. I'm going to try and jump on one of those if our schedules align. Boy, our time zone's not friendly.
We're on the other sides of the world.
thank you. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about that I haven't spoken to you about?
Oh, I mean, I'm pretty good. I think we kind of covered the bases. I got some stuff coming, so keep an eye out, and I hope that people catch it and people like it.
Oh, I'm sure they will. I'm sure that
Yeah,
you'll be asking yourself the hard questions.
there is one thing I guess I can highlight. It's a bit far off,
Yeah.
but yeah, and no, if you are interested in queer gaming, uh, people watching this video and around the holidays is a hard time. I did this thing around the holidays called Happenings in Christmas Village, and we create a bunch of it's not necessarily queer content, but it's fun content that you can dive into around the holidays. You can have a great time gaming with this content. It's free. It's made for you. It's made for all those people who are having a hard time around the holidays and want to have some fun. It's holiday themed, fun content for you to have a holiday experience that you want. Because I think there are a lot of us who don't get that around the holidays, right? So, Happenings in Christmas Village. We did it last year and the year before. It got way better in the second year, and it's only going to get better from here on. So keep that in mind. Come holiday season,
Is there a way for people to see the old versions online or anything like
Oh
that?
yeah, they're both online. If you search on Google Plus, you can find the community Happenings in Christmas Village, and the PDF is linked in there, so you can jump right into that. It's got cover art. It's got art by Michael Prescott. It's got art by Luquad, who I know you know. And it's great. It's Dungeon World content. It's Monster Hearts content. Give it a look. Give it a look. It's really worthwhile. It's got a custom playbook for Monster Hearts called the
Krampus.
The Krampus.
Yeah, that's a very good playbook actually. No,
and it's got a ton of adventure for Dungeon World if you are really into Dungeon World. So.
Beautiful. I'll include a link below as well, because I think that's an excellent resource for people to have, and I think that speaks a lot to the heart of the community that you bring and that the Gauntlet brings as well. Which,
yeah, I want people to have fun. I want people to have a good time, and I think role playing games are great for that. So I'm really happy to have led that effort, and I'm really happy to continue doing it with my games. So, yeah.
Oh, excellent. Well, thanks so much for your time, Philip. I can't thank you enough. This was a joy, and I have learned so much. And hopefully you enjoyed yourself as well.
Yeah, I did. I definitely did. This was fantastic, and yeah, I would definitely do it again. So if you ever do like a panel thing or something, or
I'd love to.
Always happy to jump on video with you.
I'd love to. If we can come up with a good idea between us, we should do something.
For GauntletCon, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
All right. Thank you very much. And to everyone else who's watching this, all my little owlets, my next thing will be I'm mostly through doing the playbooks of my game, and that means that I'm almost up to playtest, which will happen in July and be very exciting. The latest episode I did, which was the playbook, I'm really proud of, and I'm really happy about what we produced there. So I will leave you all here. Phil, I'll see you on the way out. For everybody out there, keep on giving a hoot.